It is preparing right now. It is preparing right now. Okay, we are live.
All right.
Hi, Zionsville. Josh and I are here again Tuesday morning, 11 a.m. We have a guest with us. Lance is also on your screen to chat about roads and such.
Not a special guest, just a guest.
Just a guest, yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Sorry, Lance.
special guest. Yeah, a real. We have a lot of questions that you all have submitted, so we're going to just jump right in with covering some of these topics. Don't hesitate to continue to send questions along. Amanda will be feeding us additional things that you want to talk about over this next, hour, half a day, whatever it takes to get through what you're curious about this morning. Josh just had a little bit of a heart attack then.
I got a tea time.
Yeah, right. On a video game, probably. You're playing golf anyway.
No, we're allowed to play golf in Boone County, just not in Marion County.
All right.
Amanda, we got a question?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, we will start with some road questions. So an update on the roads in our town, and some are patched up or ground down in sections. And how are these bad sections being addressed, and what is the overall process for road projects?
Yeah, sure. Spring is here. The flowers are blooming, and of course the cones are up in place and the construction is starting again. Certainly good questions all. It's important to know that we have basically two kinds of road projects or construction or public works projects in town. We have what I call a standalone project. An example of this might be Zionsville Road. Those are heavily engineered projects, and when we award a contractor that work, that's all they do. We have one contractor working on one road, Zionsville Road. Every year, the town budgets about $1.5 million for a road rehab program. And this is what we call lightly engineered projects. I always kind of use a home construction analogy. If you're going to build a home, you have a very detailed set of blueprints, and you tell your builder exactly what you want to do. And those are those standalone major road projects. But our annual road resurfacing and road rehab project is more like just hiring a contractor to paint a room in your house. You don't have to tell them exactly how to do it. Painting is just general. So you say, yes, paint this room pink. So not a lot of preparation goes into it. So that's what we call lightly engineered. So each year we take that $1.5 million more or less and spread it around to where we think are the most appropriate places and locations for that. So for instance, we've had Ford Road as part of our annual rehab program from 2019. We always used to try and still try to keep construction projects within the same calendar year, but as the town grows and our projects grow, it's getting harder and harder to fit those into one calendar year as we do more work. But Ford Road is actually part of about 11 other roads under a single contract. So that contractor is in town working. He's just not working on that particular road right now because the trades associated with road construction and repaving are very sequential in nature. So in a typical scenario, we've got anywhere from a dozen to sometimes as many as 30 roads under one single contract. And so the trades come in sequentially. So the first thing you'll see happen as a road begins to be rehabilitated is that the sidewalks, curbs, kind of those ancillary features alongside a road, not necessarily the pavement itself, but you begin to see work for them. If you're along Ford Road, you'll see we have several new concrete curb ramps. Anytime that we do any substantial work on a road, resurfacing, basically, if we touch a road, we have to follow some federal highway guidelines. And that means we have to ensure that all of those transitions from a sidewalk or a pathway to the road where people would have to cross the road meet federal and state and local standards. So the first thing that happens is you prep these areas. You basically prep it for the road work. Get the sidewalks in place, get the curbs replaced that you may have to. So that concrete crew moves into that area, they do their thing, and then they're gone. And then most people think, well, we're under construction, so we should see something in the next couple of days. Well, no, that concrete guy may have a month's worth of work. So that concrete crew is going around to all these other locations and doing work while his original, wherever he started, sits idle. You can't have these trades working on top of each other. Now, in an ideal world, you phase and time all these things so that there's the minimum time between phases, but this is all highly subjected to weather, particularly, not just weather, not just rain, but also temperature. So in the fall and in the spring, sometimes work has to be suspended on a clear sunny day because it's just too cold for that particular trade to do their work. So once the concrete and those ancillary actions alongside of roadways are complete, in a general sense, then we have a patching crew comes in. And the patching crew is going to fix those underlying structural issues that are bad on a road. That's why first you'll see some white paint on the road based on the visual cues and clues that you see on a road. They tell you something's going on underneath. That can be significantly depressed, sunken areas that are holding water, a particular type of cracking. Believe it or not, there's a science to road cracking, and different cracks mean different things. So we use these visual clues in a lightly engineered program to tell us what's going on below the road. So then that patching crew comes in and they dig out the bad spots. They go deep. We've got core base structural failures beneath. So they go anywhere from 12 to 16 inches deep, cut out that bad stuff and replace it. Now that's what leaves those rough patches, because they know as soon as they finish that patchwork, the next phase of this project is the milling crew. Now a milling is taking a gigantic industrial strength belt sander and taking off that first 1.5 inches of asphalt. So today, I know that Ford Road is a highly driven road. So people have seen that work as it's been ongoing. If you're out there today, you'll see this milling crew. It's a giant machine grinding up that top 1.5 inches of asphalt. That's going to make the road very smooth, but rough at the same time, because that's your foundation. But it's going to take out all those little imperfections, all those dips, sags, hills, little things in the roadway. And that's the last phase that you'll see before the actual surface goes down. So going back to our phasing of the trades, you got the concrete guy and the prep guy going around. They're doing their work. So they get done on Ford Road, and then they're back working on Summersong Road. You know, most people drive on Ford Road. Nobody has an idea what Summersong is unless you live there. So that crew, there is still work advancing under this contract, just waiting for the next phase to come along. So once that patch crew comes through, they finish their patching. Today, the milling has started. And milling, by standards, they have a certain amount of time from once they mill that road. We try and shoot for no more than 10 days for that exposed surface to support traffic until that replacement surface is put on there. That's like, you know, when you're wanting to adhese something and you clean it with alcohol real well before you stick it to the wall or what have you. We don't want cars running on that milled surface very long because you're getting dirt and other oil particles in there. And when that surface comes along, you want a good adhesion. So that is maybe way long of an explanation of why you work, start and stop in an area. It's because that particular trade is completed in that area and that work under the contract continues as that trade gets ahead. Milling is very fast. So it's always an exercise in scheduling on, you don't want your milling guy to catch up to your concrete guy. So that concrete, they're the ones that have a lot of work. They probably have, if your contract is 120 days, 4 months, you know, they might have half of that work under their purview. So you've got to let them get far enough ahead before you start the work behind them, because you don't want these people to catch up to either and have to stop. For instance, if you happen to get out on Ford Road and you see those big pavers and you see the big milling machines, those things can cost $5,000 to $7,000 a day if they sit idle. So contractors want to make absolutely sure that they're maximizing their return, and we want to make sure that we afford them those opportunities to maximize their return. Otherwise, they put that financial burden on us. We could get our contract specifications, third time's a charm, specifications down so tightly that a $200,000 project would cost $300,000 because we put such strict limitations. So we give a contractor in general, we give them 120 days, 180 days. We take a look at the volume of work. We talk to the contractors, how busy it is out there. So you get your work done in this window. If you want to do it all in the first 2 weeks, that's great. If you want to backload it, which is what most people do, because most contractors will overbook themselves if they have work, that's what happens more often than not. They'll put the work to the back of a contract. So that's kind of general heavy highway contracting 101. Just because you see work not happening in one place, remember that that contractor might have 20 or 30 roads under the same contract. So they're still working, they're just working somewhere else that you're not seeing. Hopefully that kind of gave a little bit of an overview. If there, any questions pop up during there that I could specifically address, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Lance.
The number one question I get asked is what the insert adjective is wrong with Zionsville Road. Is that the explanation as to sort of, it was open, but in a non-finished state?
Yes, Zionsville Road, again, that's one of our heavily engineered project. We only have one contractor. His only responsibility for us is Zionsville Road. And what you're experiencing is a typical road project. There are a couple of ways to go about significant reconstruction projects like that. You either close the road as we did to through traffic, which expedites construction, or you start building temporary roads alongside the road you're working on and you let traffic be maintained. At the time that project was begun, it was determined that we could save 2 months of overall project lengths and about $440,000 by closing that road and saving the expense of building the temporary facilities. So Zionsville Road, it was an interesting corridor because it has served 2 to 3 railroads in the past. And in as much preparatory work as you try to do to determine what's going on under the ground, when you're encountering old railroad foundation, completely unknown, that road, there was a lot of move a dozer 100 yards, figure out a problem that we didn't foresee, move a dozer 100 yards, find a new problem. And of course, utilities all follow our roadway corridors. So along Zionsville Road, we have at least a dozen utilities, and they sort of know where their things are. They sort of don't. They know kind of on a level plane, on a horizontal control, they know where they are. They don't always know how deep they are. So you throw in some relic items, artifacts from 2 or 3 old railroads that ran through there, and then all the utilities. It's a very, very challenging corridor to redevelop. On the overall scheme of things, only about 2 to 3 months behind where we wish we would have been. Of course, those delays were caused by weather and utilities where we were having to stop frequently to solve problems on the fly. But Zionsville Road, we opened that as quickly as possible before that final asphalt surface was on. That was what the condition it opened in back December timeframe. They had everything substantially done, but that last remaining thing that needed to be done was that surface, and that's what's actually, I think, beginning today.
Fabulous.
Thank
I
you.
think, yeah, thanks for all that information.
Of course.
We did have one more question related to roads. How will the coronavirus shutdown affect the completion of the new Sycamore Street Bridge and the completion of Zionsville Road projects?
At this point, with the best available information today, COVID-19 is not having an effect on the timing of any of our construction projects. Of course, the Sycamore Bridge project is a project of the Boone County Highway Department because the county owns all bridges. Of course, they are a partner agency, and we like to stay in touch and work well with everyone. So far, there have been no COVID-19 related delays. We don't anticipate those as the world begins to open back up from its isolation. Fortunately, materials have been available. Of course, any project relies on the manpower and materials to build it. And the materials are one of the largest things outside of anyone's control. If the plant that's making that pipe or making that concrete structure or making the concrete or asphalt, if they're required to shut down or they have to shut down for health reasons and we can't get the materials, obviously that's the project. The other one is each contracting company is left to themselves to determine what are the safe practices for their employees. Now, under the governor's mandates and policies, road construction was deemed a critical process, an essential employee situation. But those construction companies are not exempt from employees being exposed, potentially exposed, or actually contracting the COVID-19. Fortunately, that's happened only one time on one project. There was a slight scare that only resulted in about a 24-hour delay as they tested their employees and got their results. So far, it would seem as we're emerging from the thick portion, the thickness of the isolation and the danger zone, I guess, we're starting to see the light of day. I think that we're through the bubble. So at this point, we're not foreseeing any delays as a result of COVID-19 or.
Thank you, Lance. Moving on to some other questions that people have submitted. How will Zionsville help small businesses recover from COVID-19?
Right now, we do have resources available on that specifically to help small businesses on our website. That address is www.zionsville-in.gov/545/small-businesses. And we can send out an e-newsletter with that information plus the link in the next 24 hours to you too, so that those of you who want to get that information will have it in your inboxes.
Another question, when a salon is okay to open, will there be anyone following up to see if we are all following the recommended guidelines? And this is referring to a hair salon specifically.
Yes, so we do get some questions like this related to specific industries, and really the best guidance is going to come from state regulatory organizations. In this particular instance, speaking of a salon, we would look to the State Board of Cosmetology as to the enforcement on the state of Indiana guidance.
I think the theme you're going to hear from us today is we're not trying to set rules that are different than what the state has. So if you start ending up with Zionsville having rules and Boone County having rules and the state having rules and the federal government having rules, it starts getting very confusing as to what can you do. You know, we are really relying on the experts from a state standpoint. We are lucky enough to have a highly regarded physician, Counselor Choi, on our town council, which he's been providing advice on how we should be operating both as a council and as a town. But we're not trying to do things different. I think part of the crux of the question too is enforcement. We are not going to be sending people around, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, to like pop into a salon and see, are you keeping 6 feet apart from each other? You know, I think there will be normal rules that will be followed. So if you think about, restaurants, if the guidelines from the state are restaurant occupancy is to be 50%, and I don't know if that's the guideline, but let's just say it is, that's effectively the same as an occupancy guideline from a fire standpoint. And so, yeah, the fire inspector may be coming by to make sure that you are at the right occupancy for that restaurant and managing towards that. But otherwise, you know, my opinion, the role of government is not to go around and babysit everyone. You know, if you are in a situation where you feel that that business is acting inappropriately, you know, I wouldn't frequent that business. You know, I don't want to turn this into a nanny state. And in a situation like this, you could turn the government into a nanny state, and that's not anything that I support. So, you know, common sense, you know, support our local businesses, make sure they're following guidelines that keep you safe and keep their employees safe, and we'll get through this no problem.
Yeah, I echo everything that Josh just said. I would add that the Boone County has sort of emergency command structure. They operate just like the Indiana State Department of Health. They work directly with the Boone County Department of Health. And those are the organizations that are really responsible for enforcing a lot of these codes, even when we're not in a pandemic. So there are all sorts of regulations that our restaurants, for example, and frankly, hair salons have to adhere to. And when a person who is interacting with that business feels like there is a code violation or something, they will reach out to those county or state resources to look for relief or next steps.
Thank you. This next question is related to a topic you already addressed, but I will read it. What happens to individuals who do not follow the mandate? Example, salons. Is there a person or official we can contact if anyone is not following mandates?
Yeah, same situation. There's not someone that you would call in the town of Zionsville. You may reach out to the State Department of Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or reach out to one of those resources that you can find through the governor's resources as it relates to COVID-19.
Yeah, I mean, the state, if someone is, just blatantly violating the state order, especially with the stay-at-home order, right? I think it becomes a little less clear as we start reopening probably in phases where, certain businesses can operate at certain capacities until everything is fully open. The state does have the power to, at some point, yank your business license and you cannot do business anymore. So, I think we're hoping for the carrot and not the stick approach, and just asking everyone, use common sense. The governor is being guided by experts and is making what he feels is the best decision for the state, and we're going to follow those as well. So, while we're not trying to nanny everyone, it's not a free license to just completely ignore it. So, just use common sense and follow those types of guidelines.
This has already been talked about as well. Will Zionsville go on the opening recommendations of the governor or not? From my understanding, local governments cannot go less time, but can extend it more.
I think that we would be following the governor's direction unless there was some strong local situation that we felt warranted a different approach. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, if you look at what's happening in Cass County, there is a cluster of COVID related to a pork processing plant there. So that might be a unique situation with a unique business. And I think, speaking for you, Mayor, we are both very anxious to get businesses back open. I mean, I'm anxious to go in and visit the restaurants I like visiting and the bars I like visiting on Main Street and around Zionsville. And unless there was some very unique situation, I'd be hard pressed to go a day longer than what the governor orders from a statewide mandate.
Thank you. As a reminder for those watching, you can submit questions on YouTube in the chat section. We have that enabled. You'll just need to sign in and you can submit your questions if you have any.
By the way, Amanda, I've gotten a bunch of text questions as to where am I? I'm at home, but my background is Ron Swanson's office from Parks and Recreation. And a couple fun facts from that. If you watch the show, and Mayor, I'm going to get you to watch the show because it's hilarious. It's based in Indiana. Zionsville is featured 2 or 3 times as the Pawnee, Indiana Main Street, as well as my business, Tango, the office headquarters was featured in the there from the outside for a company called Grizzle. So Zionsville has all sorts of places that we touch, Parks and Rec. So I'm honoring Ron Swanson with my background today.
I love it. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. Zionsville needs a dog park or dog run. There are hundreds of dogs in Zionsville and nowhere for them to run.
I agree. The deputy mayor and I totally agree with this statement. This is something the town is exploring and hoping to secure space and resources to bring a dog park to our community.
I would say council agrees, or at least I should say I agree. And speaking with some members of the Parks Board, they're on board with that too. So the question's on point and long overdue, and agree we're on it.
Next question. When will it be possible for the Zionsville Golf Course to open?
So we, in the interest of public health and safety, the town facilities have been closed in following the guidance to slow the spread of coronavirus and exposure. We are going to continue that same course, and once the governor's guidelines and CDC guidelines regarding social distancing and the facilities that can be made and continue to be made safe, then we will look to open up facilities back up, including the golf course, and that information will share widely once it becomes available to us.
Yeah, golfing's a funny one too, because it takes a lot more resources to operate a golf course right now in these situations. If you're using carts, you've got to wipe them all down. Even thinking about the Zionsville Golf Course, having the facility to allow people to check in, check out, and keep those employees safe becomes additional things that have to be thought through. Putting pool noodles in the cups so that you aren't putting the ball into the hole. I mean, all those things have to be thought through. So I think we're taking the cautious approach on that. I'm as anxious as anyone to get out there, but better safe than sorry. And if we have to wait a couple of weeks for that, then so be it.
Mm-hmm.
Next question is related to the rail trail. I really enjoy the rail trail. What is the current status for connecting it to Whitestown?
So I think we touched on this a little bit last week or 2 weeks ago. Connecting it to Whitestown, there are, I think the negotiations for the last half of mile needed to reach Whitestown were completed this very recently, like December 2019. The final land acquisition, engineering, and construction plans will start this year and carry into 2021. We don't have a specific construction timeline yet, but once those engineering and construction plans are developed, then we'll be able to nail down a little bit more specifically when that is expected to be connected to Whitestown. But it's just a part of the process at this point, so it isn't something that we're waiting for land acquisition.
Thank you. One other technical note, if you are not able to see the enabled comment or chat section on YouTube, just refresh your screen and you'll be able to see that, and you can submit a question that way. This last question is related to traffic. There are increased pedestrians and bicyclists on the roads with the stay-at-home order in place. And there are several different traffic and road related projects going on that will require detours. What plans are in place to monitor traffic and control speeds this summer with all the construction projects and keep the kids, families, and residents safe?
Well, I think for sure, pedestrian, bicycle, traffic safety is vitally important, and it's a two-way street. Pedestrians and bicyclists need to understand that even though that so much there's reduced traffic, there still are barriers and threats in terms of what's happening on the roads, and they have to be just as mentally aware of and conscious of those safety concerns as they're going out and about. Officers are aware of most locations where some motorists exceed that limit and focus on enforcement in those areas. But road construction sometimes causes drivers to look for ways to get around detours and may end up creating some unexpected traffic choices from a pedestrian and a bicyclist. So again, I think it's just incumbent that everyone stay very alert and aware and mindful, and don't think that because the roadways are much less populated by cars at the moment, that means that it's every road is turned into a trail.
Call it the Waze effect, as everyone finds the shortest possible distance, and sometimes that's through neighborhoods. You know, one thing it always struck me with former Police Chief Knox, and I know with our new Police Chief Spears, you know, if you have a concern around public safety, especially around speeding, you can always call the police, right? I mean, they want to know, and they want to know where speeding is happening, especially if it's in an unsafe, you know, in a neighborhood or where there's kids playing around school zones. And so, you know, reporting that, you know, that concern, you know, whether it's a one-off concern or if the neighborhood association has more of a concern, we have speed monitoring systems that are set up just to remind people of how fast they're going relative to the speed. I know one of the goals Chief Spears has, you know, for his coming administration is to increase the number of police officers we have on the road as well. And certainly one of their goals is to remind people about speeding. I did a police ride along, and we pulled over a lot of people, and it was mostly to remind them about, you know, what speed they're going and what speed they should be going. And so, you know, it's something that I think is a valid concern, and is not something to just be ignored. And you know, we can tell people all day long, you know, be mindful and don't speed, but sometimes it takes action to remind people. I know I slow down every time I see someone pulled over. It sort of reinforces that goal.
Yeah, I'll echo that information from you all about specific locations, times, offenders. Send that to the police department. They are very eager to get that information. It does help them with their patrol plans, and they want to solve these problems and address them head on.
This last question was submitted anonymously to the mayor, but she'll probably guess who asked it. Question for the mayor: Carol Baskin's missing husband, what do you think happened to him?
She killed him. Some tiger's belly somewhere. I so appreciate our town council leadership for getting me more into the popular culture. Apparently I have to watch Parks and Rec now, despite my extreme displeasure of being talked to through the television set.
We're getting you there. I changed my background in honor of your question.
This is great. Awesome. Thanks, Zionsville, for doing everything you're doing to keep our community safe, and yeah, just it continue to enjoy the growing longer days and the sunshine, and our families. There's some definite pluses to right now. And hopefully soon we get to enjoy going out to dinner again. Thank you.
Appreciate it.